What was the thing you're most proud of during those 8 years?
It was the work and the journey that I put in and the lessons that I learned. When you're working within a team sport where you've got to come together, the skill set that you learn from doing that well was then something I can apply in general to my career. And that's why I think as a consulting actuary, I've done well, is because of a lot of those lessons I learned were from sports, were from wheelchair basketball and working through those intense situations.
Joining us in the studio today is a Canadian-American paracyclist who's competed in multiple Paralympic Games. He represented Canada in wheelchair basketball at the 2000 Sydney and 2004 Athens Paralympic Games, winning gold medals in both. He's also a father, husband, public speaker, and amazing inspiration to all. Please welcome Travis Gaertner. Hey, Travis.
Hey, how you doing, DZ?
So good to see you, man. It's been a while,
Good to see
right?
you as well. It
I
has been
mean,
a while.
it's been like, at least 5 years since we last spoke, right? And got you on the SRAM program.
It has. It's been a fantastic 5 years, though. And regardless of whether or not it's you and I talking, everybody else has just been so supportive, and it's just been an awesome relationship these past 5 years. So excited for things to come as well.
So great. I'll never forget when you called up. I'm like, who is this guy? And why should we connect with him? But then,
Right.
we met and unbelievable. So happy. And some of our components are so compatible to what you're doing, right? I mean, just
They are. And I think that was part of the reason why the original outreach is, whenever I reach out to a company to discuss partnerships, it's always somebody that I've already invested in. And because there's a good reason for that, because it's such a good fit. And so, working with SRAM, that was exactly it when we first connected. Like, there's a very good reason why I think that this, partnership could work well. And a lot of the components, like you said, fit what I'm trying to do in an adaptive way.
yeah.
It's been fantastic.
Travis, again, welcome to the show. Changing Gears is all about celebrating our athlete partners like yourself, your accomplishments on and off the bike, and what we do to make this world a bit of a better place. So I want to start by sharing your story, and we'll go right from the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Canada, actually, Winnipeg, Manitoba.
And what did your parents do growing up?
So my father was actually a teacher and a high school basketball coach, and so that's kind of what got me into the sports side of things. My mother was a piano teacher, and they sort of had this idea that they were always going to keep us as busy as possible so that we couldn't get ourselves into trouble.
Oh,
The
yeah.
more extracurricular activities, the less opportunity there is for things that are less productive in our lives. And so that started off, I was born with one limb, half a limb. And so that for me had a different way. I got into swimming. I actually even did gymnastics at one point with a prosthetic leg. And you can kind of think of how that was sort of springboard into other sports when you're trying to adapt your way and competing really in an able-bodied world. So I was doing swimming, I was doing basketball, and a lot of the stuff in an able-bodied world at first until I got into wheelchair sports later. But that was sports when athletics has always been a huge part of my life as far as I can remember.
How do you describe your impairment or ability? How do you define that?
It's a born congenital W amputee. So this is the way the good Lord made me. I came out with half a leg, and as a result, from day one, I've had to learn, figure out how to adapt. So I have a half a leg on the right side and nothing on the left.
And growing up, I can only imagine, the challenges, unless you have a very strong, awareness of self, how was that growing up?
I had to it was an advantage to me. People ask and sometimes feel sorry for my situation, but because I had to learn from day one how to adapt to play in the playground, to keep up with my friends in the neighborhood, I couldn't do it the way everybody else could. I had to find different ways to do that. And so it was challenging, but I was always kind of an outgoing person who wanted to be out there doing things. So I always found a way to adapt and to do those things and to be around community and friends and be active.
Yeah. Travis, you have any brothers or sisters?
I do. I have a sister, and she lives in Canada as well.
What does she do now?
Right now, she's working actually within social media with the city of Banff. She does marketing for the city of Banff, and as you can imagine, a lot of tourism in that city. So there's a lot for her on her plate there. And so she's still in Canada, working in Banff.
What a great mountain town too, right?
Yes, big time, big time.
Travis, when you were growing up, so you already said, you're into to swimming and cycling and gymnastics, and so lots of really cool activities. I'm curious on the idea of sport, were you ever looking to heroes of the sport? Were you looking up to people that you wanted to mimic or mirror their lives? Tell us about some of those.
Yeah, in the disabled sport community, it's a smaller community, so you definitely have access to those folks at an early stage, but then you also can see that trajectory through them of what it takes to be successful and the art of the possibility, if you will. And so in wheelchair basketball, for example, there were some local folks that I was competing with on a team, but I saw their trajectory very quick. When the trajectory was to be successful in wheelchair basketball, you got to go to the United States. You got to go to the United States to be under the best program because that's where it's most developed. And you got to find the right coaches. And that's just how that's going to take you to the Paralympic Games. And so from a very early age, I knew I'm actually not going to go to school in Canada. I want to find a way to, with my father passed away when I was young. My mother was a piano teacher. So I got to find a way to fund my way to the United States to go to college in the US and compete with the best. And so I could see that trajectory through those others. And that was kind of the steps that folks took. Where do you go to compete the best with the best resources in order to be your best self? And I saw that, and that was huge. It played a huge role, obviously, why I'm still here.
So Travis, let's fast forward a little bit to college. So you ended up going to college actually down the street from me here in Chicago, right?
Yes, University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana.
And so what was that the goal? It was like, okay, I'm going to go to college in the States and then I'm going to join the Olympic committee team and I'm going to go to the Olympics. Like that was it. That was the path.
That was the only path. So I only applied to one school. I didn't
Oh,
apply to
wow.
any Canadian schools, one school in the US, because the coach of the Canadian national team at the time was coaching at the University of Illinois. And like I said, some of the peers that I grew up with had gone to the University of Illinois. It's a very developed program for disabled athletes, not just basketball, and also had the best kind of both worlds for me. So wheelchair basketball being one, like you said, my goal was to go to the Paralympic Games. And two, I wanted, sports don't fund life. I knew
Yeah,
that I had to work on my academics and I wanted to become an actuary. And University of Illinois had top three actuarial schools. So best of both worlds, it was the only answer for me.
that's awesome. All right, so we got to stop on actuary because I'm not actually certain I even know what an actuary is. So
Right,
for
right.
those of us in the audience that are listening, tell them what the heck is an actuary?
So the best way to describe an actuary is that we price and measure risk. So if you can be an insurance actuary and price out the risk involved in something, I specifically work within pension plans. So I work with large corporations, not individuals, to say, based on this promised pension for your employee population, it is worth X dollars in liability. So you measure that liability, then how do you manage the overall risk of that liability as it relates to the balance sheet of an organization and other priorities?
So you're good with data, you're good with numbers, you're good with math, like Excel and all that stuff, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Somebody does the Excel work for me now, but I go out and explain
All
it.
right, so you had an awesome backup, right? Which actually is your professional side hustle today. You're still doing that, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I'm balancing trying to be a professional cyclist and an actuary, consulting actuary at the same time, which is an interesting challenge.
Hopefully your employer's not listening right now, but which would you consider the side hustle? Your work as an actuary or your work as an athlete?
Honestly, it goes back and forth. There are times where I'm really focused on cycling, and I feel like right now that's the priority, and my employer is just amazingly supportive of that.
Yeah.
And so they've come to me and said, "No, we want you to do this. We want to support you. How can we do that?" Frankly, and then I wouldn't be as supportive of me if I were my employer as they have been. So it's been a really nice balance, if you will, from that perspective. And there are other times, for example, when I'm traveling with the Team USA internationally, and things get, anxious or, I'm just uncertain about what's going on. Work is my backbone. That's so I'll work 2 or 3 hours a day while I'm there, and that calms me down. That gets me into
Yeah.
the right headspace. That gets me to
Yeah.
where I want to be.
Travis, let's get back to college. So
Yep,
you advanced pretty well in wheelchair basketball in the States, and did you have your eyes then? You were still a Canadian citizen though, right? And so you weren't going to
correct. Yes.
compete with the United States team, but you were going to learn in the United States. And then when the Olympics came around in 2000, hope to get on the Canadian team. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The program being more developed in the US allowed me to develop the skill set, like you said, for the ultimate goal of going to Sydney. And the good thing was the coach of the team at University of Illinois was the coach of the Canadian national team. I also had teammates at the University of Illinois, same idea. They were
Nice.
Canadian, going there to learn, develop their skill set, and we would leave. We would travel together. We would leave and go to these international competitions together. But not only that, of course, we had teammates on the University of Illinois that were part of Team USA.
Right.
So we'd compete together, and we'd fly out, Paralympics and other things internationally. We compete against each other. It was a really fantastic setup, and you develop a community really quickly of like-minded folks who are really trying to be their best.
That's cool. I'm curious about trials though. So you weren't guaranteed a spot on the team, right? Or were you?
Correct. No, every year you have to try out to make the team, similar to paracycling right now, where you've got to, attempt to make a roster for a given event. Every year we would try out. We would come back from the US, we'd fly into Canada for, 10 days where we would go through the trials of having that team renamed year after year.
Nice. Okay, so you try out for the 2000 Sydney Games. You make the team. Um, I've interviewed a few Olympians and Paralympians on this show, and I'm always excited to talk to Olympians because it's just the coolest thing. Like it's better than world championships because everybody knows the Olympics, right? It's a
Right.
global stage. How cool was the Olympics in 2000 for you?
Amazing. And I think for me, the reason it was so cool was because, in the US, where we have a developed sport of wheelchair basketball, it isn't as developed from a marketability perspective as overseas. So as soon as we went overseas, I might be used to 200 people showing up at a Final Four championship game in the U.S. Fly overseas and go to the Paralympics in Sydney, and we had 15,000 people at our gold medal game. So that's a very different dynamic, right? You're sitting at the free throw line with 200 people versus what you'd expect to see on TV with 15,000 people cheering. That was just amazing. We would leave the gym and the facilities and have to be escorted out because there were so many people coming to have us sign autographs. I did not experience that in the US, right? People are not trying to follow me around to get my autograph. But overseas and at the Paralympic Games, that was that type of atmosphere. So just the support of the Australians and the rest of just the community to come around that was a totally new level for me, and something that really just could have spring shot me forward into wanting to develop more and more into the sport.
Did you have a similar experience 4 years later in Athens?
Yeah, Athens was similar. Maybe not quite as many folks as Sydney, but it was very similar, very supportive of a lot of folks there. The marketability of the Paralympic Games was growing at that time as well. Um, over the years has become even more and more prevalent out there, where you're getting more marketability and more sponsorships and folks coming around to help support the growth. Athens was different for me in that Sydney was my first time through, and I had a supporting role within the team. Athens was more, I had a much more of a major role, if you were. I was
Yeah.
getting a lot more playing time. I was on the court with my role, and that was a experience to being on the court and contributing in a different way in Athens made Athens actually kind of the pinnacle of my career, if you will.
As a sport, wheelchair basketball, has it exploded exponentially today? Is it still, where does it sit in the world's attention?
It's kind of the biggest sport within para sports. Everybody has access. If you think about a disabled athlete, you can't just go to your community center and say, okay, I want to learn how to do this sport. I want to learn how to get engaged. There's just not enough folks around. Wheelchair basketball has that sort of critical mass, if you will. And so almost every disabled athlete, even a lot of my current teammates on Team USA for paracycling, a lot of them started when they were first injured in wheelchair basketball because there is that critical mass. You can show up, learn,
Right.
get active as a disabled athlete, and so that has created a lot of growth, if you will. And it's just over the years and globally, it's the premier sport, if you will, from that perspective.
What made you decide to hang up your wheelchair basketball hat, so to speak, after Athens?
I was at a point in my life where I've been working in my actuarial career for 5 or 6 years at that point, and I knew that I wanted to take that to another level. I knew that I couldn't do that training 15, 20 hours a week and getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to train, go to work, then train in the evenings. It was just prohibiting me from going as far as I wanted to in my academic and corporate career. And so after Athens, we'd done it twice, gold medals. I feel like from my skill set perspective, I developed to be where I was going to get. and I didn't have a lot more to give, if you will, to the sport, but I had a lot more to give in my corporate career. And so I retired just thinking I'm going to focus on my corporate career now and try and move up the ranks and one day have a family. And that was the thinking behind it at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Smart. Are you familiar with the film The Weight of Gold?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Oh man, you gotta see it.
Yeah.
You're the second person I've talked to about that hasn't seen it. It's an interesting one. I think Michael Phelps narrates and stars in it, but there's a lot of other Olympians in it, and they talk about just the massive pressure, right? Social anxiety, peer pressure
Hmm.
of, competing on the world stage, right? With that focus, and then coming home and being like, oh, what am I doing here, right? And the crash. Did you experience that after each of those games, coming back and sort of having to redefine yourself, or how'd you handle it?
Yeah. The pressure is huge, and that's part of the reason why I also took a step back, in that it just takes over every aspect of your life in a way that eventually can just become tiring. But what I had to find a way to channel that energy, though, like you said. And so I took up new things, but I really poured myself into my corporate career, working longer hours. And then at the same time, I thought, well, from an athletic perspective, I still want to stay active. And so I went from twice a day at the gym for basketball to twice a day at the gym for lifting weights and doing cardiovascular. So I didn't quite give that up, because I needed to, like you said, funnel that energy when you come back, and you come back and you just feel like, what am I doing? What's the purpose of my life? This is like, spent so many years doing this one thing, and so you have to find a way to funnel that energy. So I think I did it well with both sides,
Yeah.
remaining active, which enabled me to jump into this cycling career, 10 years later. And then secondly, just really working hard at my job.
Well, and in all that, you also wanted to start a family too. Tell us about your wife and your three lovely kids. Where'd you meet your wife?
I, I always said I would never date anybody at work. That was always just something I said. And then I met my wife at work and quickly decided that I wanted to change that mantra. So I met her at work with a work party, and approached her on instant message at work during using work channels. And over time, she was an actuary at the time, so we related in that way. We were able to work through the exam process and that together. And eventually we were married, and she decided she wanted, the actuarial profession is one that you really have to devote a lot of time initially, 5 to 10 years, to get where you want to go by passing a series of exams that are difficult. So she did those and then said, I did that. I want to continue to do that and work within, as a client lead for some time. And then eventually, when we decided to have children, she became a stay-at-home mom. So we have 3 children now, 5, 8, and 10. And my wife does a fantastic job homeschooling them and giving back that way also to the community.
All right, Travis, let's change gears a little bit and talk about in your Paralympic career as a wheelchair basketball athlete. w- I'm I'm kind of jumping ahead here thinking you're going to say gold medal, but what was the thing you're most proud of during those 8 years?
Like you said, the gold medal for sure. It was the work and the journey that I put in and the lessons that I learned. When you're working within a team sport where you've got to come together, appreciate different skill sets, appreciate ways of working together within different personality and characteristics, that is just so prevalent in team sports. And you're together for the Paralympic Games 6 weeks, and then you're at the Paralympic Games for 2 weeks. So you're together for 8 weeks in high stress situations. The skill set that you learn from doing that well was then something I can apply in general life to my career. And that's why I think as a consulting actuary, I've done well, is because of a lot of those lessons I learned were from sports, were from wheelchair basketball and working through those intense situations. And so, yes, it's the gold medal, but it's the sticking with it. Even after Sydney, I thought this was so hard. I don't know if I can keep going. And I remember actually going to my manager at the time at the company I worked for, said, look, I don't think I'm going to Athens. I can't keep balancing all this. And he said, yes, you are. You're going to go to Athens, and no, you're not going to retire yet.
That's
And
cool.
so working through that with him, spending another 2 years in the sport before I retired, just all came together as just an accomplishment to me that was just applicable in so many other areas of life.
I'm thinking about wheelchair basketball, and I can only imagine, some fingers getting crushed, some, limbs getting crushed. Have you ever had any, crazy crashes on the court?
Oh yes, So wheelchair basketball, like you said, because it's so fast and you're in a wheelchair, those things happen all the time. So we can talk about cycling crashes, which I've had my fair share of, but those happen every, 4 or 5 months, maybe once a season, twice a season, if you're lucky, right? Wheelchair basketball happened twice a quarter in a
Yeah.
game. Um, and so you had to learn how to make the wheelchair an extension of your body. You strap it in, it's now an extension of your body so that you can move and be able to, in those crashes, roll, for example, right? So you're not just hitting the ground, you're rolling so that you don't hurt yourself as much. And you're flying through the air sometimes because we could get all of our wheels up off the ground to get a ball just using, the, 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 uh, the weight of your body
Right.
to spring forward to grab things. So you're in the air a lot, you're tilting onto one wheel a lot, and people are hitting you while you're doing that, and you're rolling down. I definitely had my fair share of, okay, on my way down, my head hit somebody else's chair and had stitches on it. It was pulled off the court and bleeding and had to get stitched back up. And, then telling everybody I was ready to go the next game. That happened at one of our international competitions. So yeah, it's a really high paced sport. When you see people in wheelchairs flying through the air, it's it's pretty intense.
So you already had the aptitude and knowledge through your wheelchair basketball career for wheeled vehicles, right? And you're already passionate for wheeled vehicles. What made you think, you know what, that chapter's closed. This new chapter of dedicated cycling is the next one that I want to get into. What was it? What crystallized, what happened in your life that said, you know what, I want to ride a bike?
Bunch of things. If I tie it back to wheelchair basketball, I was always somebody who needed speed. I needed to be moving all the time. So even if we were playing against a team where we didn't necessarily think we should do a full court press, my coach had me on the full court press because I needed to
Hmm.
be moving fast all the time in order to perform and think well. So if you take that moving fast all the time, direct applicability to cycling, obviously. The other thing was I didn't actually get into a hand cycle until my late adult years. You know, most children learn to ride a bike. Well, my children know how to ride a bike. You teach your children that. I, with a half a leg, never learned how to ride bikes. So when I first saw a hand cycle as an adult and got into it, I thought, wow, this is the most freeing thing in the world, right? Think somebody who's never experienced cycling at all. You get onto a bike and you're moving quickly, and wow, I love that speed aspect of it. And so I fell in love with hand cycling very quickly. Um, and kind of started off with let's just do it once a week in the summer times to help with my fitness journey to oh, I wonder if I could do this again. I've got that competitive mentality, right? So let's just see what would happen if I started, formal training and what can I do domestically? And I wrote up as an actuary plan, right? I wrote a 4-year plan. Start domestic, train for a year, see what you can do. If that works, try and go internationally, see what you can do. And had, funding goals for each of those stages to see how I would progress and progress through all that, fast enough that, yeah, now I'm on the international stage on a frequent basis and loving it.
Wow. Well, do you remember the first event that you entered as a paracyclist?
So domestically, yes, I remember locally going to just an organized ride here, which to me was a race, even though it wasn't. Right?
Yeah.
You go through an organized ride, and there was another hand cyclist there, and I just watched him sort of do this as I was, I thought, well, that's not okay. How do I not let that happen again?
Did you catch
So
up to
that's what
him?
not in that race, no. But I talked to him afterwards, and he started getting me into the, this thing called a power meter, and
Oh yeah.
all of the stuff that you start to think about. You can train with power, and here I'll even create some workouts for you. So you got intervals 3 days a week, and that's kind of how I started off with him, just saying, "I'll throw some stuff at you, get yourself a power meter, and I'll go train." Um, so I started doing that for a while, and then the next year, he was the one looking at me as I was going past him,
Awesome.
uh, and from there, started to look at what it would take to go internationally. Now, international, the first event was much different. It's a different game, especially within disabled sports. You go from domestic competition with some folks, a lot of folks, but not nearly as much as when you go international. So taking that game from domestic to international was a big change. So my first event internationally was great. Kind of thrown to the wolves and taught
Yeah.
me what I needed to do to take it to the next level. And that's where I really fell in love with. Oh wow, I could really up my game, and there's a lot more I can learn in this sport.
Travis, tell us about that the sport. What are the distances, the times? Like I don't know anything about the sport of paracycling. What does it look like?
Broadly speaking, there first you got to get classified. So everybody's got. You've seen one person with a disability. You've seen one person with a disability. So you've got to kind of rank people and put people into groups according to their level of disability, if you
Yeah.
will. So some folks might be just missing, a small part of the bottom of their leg. So they're going to be an upright bike, for example. So the different classifications people sit on a regular bike, there's different classifications of folks like myself who sit in a hand cycle. And so you get classified then according to basically 13 or 14 different levels of disability. And then that's who you compete against when you go internationally, your classification. So within that, then to your point, yeah, there's a time trial and a road race, just like you would expect. And the time trials are typically, they're not your 40K time trials that you might be used to in regular cycling. I think they're typically more around your 20 to 30 kilometer
Yeah.
time trials. But next question I always get is, well, how fast do you move in a hand cycle? And to be competitive at the international level, we're time trialing at about 27 miles an hour
Wow.
on a flat surface, if you will. And then the road race is usually 60 to 80 kilometers. I went from miles to kilometers, 60 to 80 kilometers. And that's, very similar. You're working within a group. So you're, 25 miles an hour on an 80-kilometer course.
Any crazy crashes on the bike yet?
For sure. My first year, I had a couple, and didn't really know what I was doing. Like I said, thrown to the wolves, and then I didn't have a lot for many years. But I'm the type of person who really wants to stretch myself. And in wheelchair basketball, you learned how to tilt up onto one wheel by falling. Where is that point where you're going to fall? Right? Cycling is
Right.
very similar. When you're learning how to corner and things like that, you don't know what your limit is until you actually fall and crash. And so, in last year's World Championship, there was a descent and followed by a really hard left-hand turn. And we were descending at 40 miles an hour. And on the third or fourth lap, the world champion at the time attacked just before that descent, kind of went by us. And there were about four of us left in the group in the front. And I decided, all right, I feel like I'm turning pretty well. I'm going to really stretch these limits. I gave the space that you would take to hopefully slingshot around them at the bottom. If I take that turn faster, slingshot around them, make it up to the fellow who had just launched the attack. So I did that, and I took the turn at 36 miles an hour, but the space I left was the problem. So I didn't
Oh,
leave
geez.
enough space to get that slingshot. And so I met them just at the end of the turn where I couldn't adjust my line and hit one of them, went flying through the air, literally ended up on somebody's lawn. There was a tire, barriers of tires right there, knowing that this was a dangerous spot. Went right through those. Those were flying through the air. People thought it was my tire sealant, but it was the water in the tires. It was just thrown out, ended up on the lawn. And luckily, due to wheelchair basketball, I knew how to roll. So 36 miles an hour crash probably should have broken a lot of bones. I had 3 minor fractures and was back on the bike in 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
But that should have been worse.
Travis, let's talk about gear. You're a gear junkie, right?
Very much so. Very much
Tell
so.
us tell us about your bike. You can't just go to the bike shop and buy a hand cycle, right? These things are custom made, custom fitted, very tuned to the individual's, specific needs and performance, etc. Tell us about your bike.
Yeah, so I actually have my bike itself. The frame is a custom built bike, like you said. I flew to Spain to have my own mold made to make this bike. Once I knew what I wanted, I knew that I could just have that mold made so that it would really fit me the way I wanted to fit. Be lightweight, more rigid. But obviously, when you have less moving parts, less adjustability, it's more rigid and less and lighter. So that's what I use for the bike, and then I've got a lot of different pieces around that I've adapted to work for me. So I've had custom footrest design where we did a 3D print, 3D mock-up of my foot so that my footrest is sitting in a nice carbon fiber footrest. Done a lot of work with the SRAM with the wireless blips, and so the wireless blips are adapted into my grips as I'm moving, so I'm not worrying about extra wires.
Yeah.
It's much easier to kind of put them where I need them to be with those wireless blips and things like that. So I spent a ton of time literally just going outside, staring at the bike and knowing, how can I make this more efficient?
I'm assuming it's, carbon fiber, super light, super aerodynamic as much as you can, right?
Yeah, carbon fiber pre-preg method to make sure that it's extra light, extra rigid. Yeah, everything I put on that is, like I said, anytime I can find a component on that to change, I find somebody locally to hire to get my own mold made so that will be as light as possible.
Do you care about weight, or are you trying to pull every gram out of this thing, or not so much?
I still do, yes. I think aero is a higher focus, so I think more about aerodynamics. But sometimes when I'm building something to make it more aero, just given the way I sit, I'll build it myself at first, and then it's too heavy, so that's when I go hire somebody to get a mold made to make it lighter. So yeah, I try to pull as much as I can off of it, but I think I'm already so lightweight as it is. My power to weight ratio is very high,
Yeah.
just having half a body. And so for me, where I will lose time is with the bigger folks are on descents or just long gradual descents or flats with, where they can just put in so much more raw power. And so aerodynamics for me is a bigger focus for that reason.
I'm assuming you have a couple, right? You have a backup, you have a primary, maybe you have indoor. Do you do a lot of, hand cycling indoors? What does that routine look like?
Yeah, so like you said, I've got a backup at all times because you can't just go to your store, like you said, and buy a new bike if I crash. It could be 6 months before I get a new one, so it's important to have a backup. Same with all the components. My other one's ready to go at any time. Otherwise, I could be out of training for 4 or 5 months. And then yeah, do in the winter season a ton of work indoors. I have a Wahoo kicker that I mount upside down, so on a hand cycle, just the way you get on it, you can't just put the hand cycle down. You actually have to flip it, mount it
Right.
underneath the table so that you can get the hand cycle onto the kicker. But I've fantastic setup. I've got my own little training center, two big TVs, for both your avatar and for the Wahoo, and then Netflix on the other side, and all that with my strength training and my whole garage. I got the garage set up for my own shop. I have all my needs right there. It's a really nice setup.
Travis, I think I've seen also recently you either were or are a tonal ambassador using the tonal weight system. Are you
Yes.
still connected with them?
Yes, and the tonal is out there in the garage. Very similar story. My pancake, I call it a garage, but it's a nice setup. The similar story where I put my money where my mouth is. I bought my own tonal because I knew that it was going to revolutionize the way I train as a disabled athlete. So the
Yeah.
idea that you can turn weight on and off when you're in position, so I don't have to pick up heavy weights, get into that position, and then push them. I can't do that because I don't have the ability to move things around with heavy weights. So that's why I got into tonal, and once I figured out how revolutionary it was for my training, I approached them in this very similar manner to say, look, this is how it's changed my life. Let's work together to get that message out there into the marketplace. And so I'm still working very closely with them and train on my tonal 3 days a week.
I want to switch over a little bit into community and
Mm.
the biggest community that you're involved in is the para community. And through our discussions, I've learned a little bit about your involvement with that community. Tell us a little bit about your sort of representative role in the para community, and what do you do? What are the responsibilities? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so within the US OPC, every NGB, national governing body, has a representative. So whether it's swimming, paraswimming, basketball, cycling, paracycling, everyone has an athlete rep that's elected from the members of that community. And that athlete rep then works within the broader athlete rep system within the USOPC, called the AAC. And then we also have the role of working within our national governing body. So within the paracycling, I work directly with leadership to be that liaison between the athlete and leadership, but it's not just the athlete voice, it's also leadership's voice, right? Sometimes it's being able to bring folks together to collaborate in a better way, is how I think about that role. And so that could be from issues that come up to our selection procedures, different ideas, courses, events, all those types of things. I'm kind of that person who brings the two together. So that takes a lot of extra time because I'm weighing in on things, I'm reviewing things, um, and just trying to make sure that I'm representing fellow athletes in the best way that I can versus my own needs. It can't be about my needs; it has to be about their needs and how they can have a better experience.
Tell me, what are some of the quote unquote issues that the community is wrestling with right now?
Um, Obviously, just having different personalities when you're training together as a team. So people have different opinions about how that should be run, when we should be training, when we should be previewing, how do we travel, what size of the rosters. One of the biggest issue, though, I would say right now is within the classification system that we have. And because you get in front of basically a group of folks to have them judge you and tell you this is the classification that you're going to fall into based on your level of disabilities, there's a lot of folks who try to fake their classification, call it classification doping, right? Because if I can
Right.
make myself look more disabled and compete with a, a group of folks that are more less disabled, I can do better. And so it's a
Right.
big thing right now that we're working through, that the UCI has to work through as well. And I think it's going to continue to evolve. But the classification doping is a real thing. And so if we can't work through that, it basically takes people and gets them to a position where they're just not engaged in the sport anymore. How can I compete against these guys that are supposed to be this class, but they're in my class? They're unbeatable because they're just functionally can do things that I can't do because of their level of disability. Um, and the other thing that I would say is that because of the way that that works, when it comes to the games, the UCI wants to protect certain classes of disability to make sure that they're viable at the games.
Right.
We only have a certain amount of slots. And so they might say this classification only has 6 people globally who are going to be competitive at the game. So I'm going to tell country X in the USA, you've got to bring this classification. So they do ring fencing. That's a big thing too, because I've had to struggle with that. When I showed up to the trials for the Tokyo Games, there was only 4 spots out of our 10 that were left because
Right.
of ring fencing and other things. So a lot of that control really is actually removed from you even more in disabled sports because the UCI does this ring fencing where if you're in a very deep class, like mine is very deep, I'm never going to be ring fenced because
Right.
there's hundreds of folks globally who are very good in my class who can compete. And so that's another mental aspect that we're working through and that I have to work through too, to say, not in my control, gotta let that go. Even if, I did beat half the folks in a certain trial, but I wasn't ring fenced. That's just the way that it works. And I love cycling, so I love the journey.
What's your classification specifically? What's it referred to as?
MN H4, so Handcycle 4. And so that goes H1 through H5, H1's being your more disabled athlete, H5 being your less disabled athlete. And so I'm kind of on the upper end of that, if you will. And again, we're a very deep class.
In an event like the Olympics, there's no age group, right? Like a,
Correct. Yep.
a different event. Let's talk about the future of Olympics. Do you have your eye on Paris?
I have my eye on Paris. Yes, I have my eye on Paris. Because it's the pinnacle of sports, right? The Olympic
Yeah.
Games, Paralympic
Yeah.
Games is the pinnacle of sports, and so that is the ultimate goal. I will say though that mentally, I focus a little bit more on the World Championships, only because that ring fencing thing we just talked about doesn't come into play. So I have more control over my destiny to make the World Championships than I do for the Paralympic Games.
World Championships, where's Para World Championships in, well, when you're talking about that, are you talking about 23 or 24?
So every year there's World Championships in 23, the para for the first time, we're going to be with all of the cycling disciplines within the UCI. So Paracycling is going to be with all the other cycling disciplines all together in Glasgow.
In
So it's
Glasgow,
going to be a
okay.
pretty big year. Yeah.
So Travis, tell us about World Championships this year in Glasgow. So we've been affectionately calling it Super Worlds, right? Because there's so many different categories. Um, when will you qualify? And then if you qualify, will you race for the United States or for Canada?
So our qualification event is set for mid-June. So I've not made the team yet, but mid-June we'll all get together and we will in Wisconsin be competing for the allocated spots that are available. And I will with Team USA. So now I've been competing with Team USA now since I started my cycling career, and that's where I will remain. But it's an interesting event because what has to happen is you got 13 different classifications. I'm going to call it 8 spots. I'm going to make that up. So I could be the fastest in the world in my classification and not make the spot there because there's 14 different classifications. There's not room for all 14 to go. So what
Right.
they do is they develop a ranking list and basically standardize our time within each other. We're using factors to kind of factor out the disability, if you will, to put us on a list to say, okay, these top 8 in that example are going to go based on those factor times.
Well, hey, I'm reaching out right now far in advance, I know, but if you are at all close to Chicago, we would love to host you at SRAM's headquarters in Chicago on
Oh, that'd
on
be
your journey.
fantastic. Yes, I would love that.
Take a look at your schedule. We'll open up we'll lay down the red carpet for you
Let's do it.
if you can make it. Travis, we are almost out of time, but we have this one last speed round section of our show that we like to end with. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Tacos or burritos?
Burritos.
Spicy or mild?
Spicy.
Cold weather or hot weather?
Hot weather.
If you had to compete in rain or snow?
Rain.
The mountains or the beach?
Mountains.
Cities or suburbs?
Suburbs.
Cars or trucks?
Cars.
Pavement or dirt?
Pavement.
Do you ever get off-road? Do you do, this is a little tangent. Do you do anything on the gravel scene?
I would love to, and especially off-road. They've got off-road hand cycles now that just look epic to get out on the trails. And I haven't done that yet. Again, you got to find another $5,000 to get one of those bikes to try them out, but it looks epic.
I know as an actuary, you know the equation N+1, right?
Yes.
Gloves or gloveless?
Gloveless.
Low pressure in your tires or high pressure in your tires?
Oh, it's got to be low. Just got some new 303s and running 30 millimeter tires at 39 psi.
39. Wow.
Yeah, because remember, there's three wheels on a hand cycle, so I'm distributing that weight over 3 wheels versus 2, and the weight at the back. Yeah, we use the zip calculator to come up with that 39 psi.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, and you know what they say, right? Comfort equals speed.
Very much so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And I shared that with a lot of athletes on this last trip. We were running 80 to 90 psi. I'm like, we're on cobbles. Try this. Go down to 55. Try it. And a lot of people have changed.
Fix it yourself or take it to a mechanic?
Fix it myself.
And last question, dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Travis Gaertner, it's been an honor and a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for joining the show and sharing your story.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a blast.
I hope we see you in the Midwest soon.
Thanks, DZ.